Those of you familiar with the history of Azeroth have probably been wondering why we've been deliberately skipping over the Dragonflight and their charge. It's because, ultimately, all of those events only really matter to the narrative twice, and here, now, is the first true intersection of time. The Bronze Dragonflight was charged with keeping time in check. Time travel in this setting is a mild variant of Type 2 and Type 3. There's one singular timeline, but it's kind of alterable, but not really. And every time you attempt to change history, you end up crafting a new alternate timeline. The catch is alternate timelines don't last. They branch out and then eventually wither and fade away. Only the prime timeline marches onwards. Now, if you craft an alternate timeline, those and that within can be transported to the prime timeline. Evacuated, if you will, thus challenging and changing the prime timeline by virtue of addition. There are other caveats, but those don't matter right now, because the Bronze Flight, with periodic champion aid, has been fighting against alterations to the prime timeline for a while now. The first major incident was at Durnhold Keep. We've already discussed its significance. This is where Thrall freed himself, leading to the formation of the Horde, and forever changing history. This is about 2 years before the Third War. As Thrall attempted his escape, they stumbled upon sabotage from an uncertain source. The champions present, disguised with illusions to appear appropriate for the time period, assisted Thrall in defeating the abusive Lieutenant Drake, a violent anti-orc bigot who took out his frustrations on his prisoners daily. Past him was the fiercely loyal Captain Scarlock, friend of the treacherous Perinold family and another orc abuser. At this point, the champions sought to get Thrall out to safety, but he was concerned for his friend Taretha, and so against their advice charged the local city of Taran Mill to save her. At this point, their opponents finally showed their hand and the Epoch Hunter arrived. The champions' first encounter with the infinite Dragonflight. The Epoch Hunter used Taretha as a bargaining chip to force Thrall into confrontation. And by himself, Thrall at this point was no match. Thankfully, the champions were present and saved Thrall and Taretha both. Unfortunately, their memories had to be wiped of the incident, and Cleanup Bronze Dragon swept in to attend the details and ensure no real alterations remained. The Bronze were still in the cleanup phase when another incursion was detected, mere months prior to the First War, some 33 years ago, where the currently possessed Medivh was fashioning powerful magics to tear a hole through space, connecting Azeroth to Draenor with the first opening of the Dark Portal, deep within the brackish jungles of the Black Morass. This time the Infinites were far less subtle, openly sending their forces through to try and kill Medivh before he could finish the summoning. Wave after wave of monochromatic flight charged Medivh, including the Draconid Deja and the Drake Temporis. Both sought to change the minds of the champions by tempting them with a vision of a world absent the First and Second Wars. To no effect. Sick of this, the Infinites sent one of their rare and powerful fully fledged dragons, Aeonis, who rather than any attempt at dissuasion skipped right to the threats. Unfortunately for him, he was facing seasoned champions, and so the Dark Portal opened, and time marched on as it should. The Infinites took these drastic defeats to heart. Manipulation didn't work. Brute force didn't work. It was time to be precise, minuscule, microscopic changes that wouldn't even be noticed. This was bloody subtle. All the Infinite did here was cast illusory magics over some of the plagued grain of Stratholme, so that Arthas Menethil and his men would arrive to find things perfectly fine. Thus no culling of Stratholme, and much of the Third War and beyond would be irrevocably altered. Unfortunately for them, the craftiest and cleverest of the Bronze managed to detect this change. Chromie. Chromie's actually been involved with the champions' lives for some time now. She interfered in Anderhall, she assisted with Darrowshire. She was responsible for interactions with the Bronze Dragon Shrine. She helped to defend Hyjal, and she would be present in several future moments as well, from a certain point of view. Either way, Chromie sent the champions to remove the illusions, ensuring Arthas would discover what he needed to and the culling would commence. The Kobayashi Maru proceeded as expected, with the champions assisting Arthas in the culling itself, something not every champion was overly fond of doing. The chance to kill some Scourge helped. Meathook, a smart and explosive abomination, Salrum the Flesh Crafter, one of Shalamance's first graduates, both fell and Arthas pushed further into the burning city. But here the pattern persisted. The Infinites, realizing their ploy was over, simply attacked directly, seeking to kill the tortured prince. Led by the Chronoloord Epoch, The Infinites' attack was, once again, repulsed, leaving Old Arthas to attack Old Mal'Ganis and the eventual expedition to Northrend. In the present, Thrall, the Dragonflights, and the Champions wrestled with a difficult problem. Even though the Twilight's hammer was smashed beyond recognition, they still had one last stronghold somewhere, and the threat of Deathwing himself was growing. The problem was Deathwing was a dragon, who was an aspect, who was empowered by the old gods, who had tremendous energy thundering through him, who was protected by elementium plates of armor. They required something that could focus a stupid amount of power into a singular point to pierce and destroy the monstrosity. They needed the Dragon Soul. The Dragon Soul was a weapon crafted with the essences of each of the aspects of the Dragonflights during the War of the Ancients. It is at least partially responsible for the mess Deathwing is now, and is definitely responsible for the devastation of the Blue Dragonflight and Malygos, which led to the Nexus War. It's also long gone, having been destroyed, the essences returned some years prior. Thus our two stories intertwine. The Dragon Soul could be plucked from the past, used to destroy Deathwing, and returned to its proper place in history. The problem, however, was that the Infinite Flight had played their final gamble. They used all their powers to lock the Bronze Flight from being able to travel to the War of the Ancients. In order to journey back, they would need to first traverse the timeways to the source of all their problems to date, the Infinite Flight's central headquarters, the End Time. The End Time is complicated, but we'll discuss the paradox in just a minute. For now, the Champions took in the scenery. Wormrest Temple, smashed by Deathwing's corpse, his final reward for his servitude to the old gods. Little Alive roamed this planet, just twisted echoes of ghosts. Enraged by his failure to protect the world and losing his horde to Hellscream, what's left of Bane lingers at the Obsidian Shrine, lamenting the death of his beloved father. The last remnants of Jaina Proudmoore fought blindly to protect a shrine that died years ago, driven by frustration and pain. The scattered pieces of Sylvanas Windrunner had failed in her schemes, and she took out her dark fury upon anything she could perceive. And the wistful howls of Tyrande Whisperwind echoed in the woods, crying, desperate for any sign of her beloved light, and finding none. At the end, they faced one of the only things still alive in this realm, Mirazond, Nozdormu's potential future self. I mentioned paradoxes. In the past, Nozdormu, the bronze aspect of time, was gifted a vision of his own death, which resulted in the old god's influence subverting Nozdormu so he would attempt to subvert his own mortality, leading to him shattering the timeways and creating the infinite Dragonflight, and all the troubles thus far. Thing is, Mirazond's moment of creation hasn't come yet, as Nozdormu retained his sense of self. And, spoilers, the old god's influence would be removed along with the power of the aspects prior to that moment. This means Mirazond had actually come from a branching timeline, and was not the prime Nozdormu, who would be able to escape this fate. But, in keeping with what I mentioned earlier, alternate things and people could travel to and influence the prime timeline. This is how the Infinites were able to operate, alternate versions of time-traveling bronze drakes, corrupted by the old gods. Thus, Nozdormu and the Champions destroyed the wayward Mirazond, annihilating the alternate Infinite Flight and removing their influence on the timelines, and opening up the way to the War of the Ancients and the Dragon Soul.